Hey there, everyone. Welcome. I think we might be live on YouTube now, which is fantastic. Just popping in to do a little bit of a casual Q&A. It's Thursday afternoon for me. Let me just double check my settings. There we go. I've got a couple of different screens open when we do these YouTube lives. So if you're just joining me, welcome. Let me know where you are joining us from today. It's always great to see so many of you in the chat. And we're just going to hang out for a little bit, and I can, share some insights about the astrology coming up. If you've got any questions, if there's anything on your mind, maybe you're curious about Saturn in Pisces, maybe you're thinking about Venus retrograde in Leo, maybe you're figuring out how to tap into Jupiter and Taurus. Maybe there's something different or more specific that you are grappling with astrologically. So a big welcome. I can see so many of you popping in. I see Eddie and Dawn. Hello. Aries Angel. Paul is here. Definitely let me know where you are joining from. Claire is joining us from Oregon. Christina in Sao Paulo in Brazil. Leisha is joining us from California. I see Faye from Arizona. So how are you all doing? What's on your mind? I'm just here to kind of answer questions, have a little bit of an astro chit chat and hang. So if there is something that you are curious about, let me know. I would love to provide whatever insights I can. I know I'm thinking a little bit about the next couple of months, thinking about Venus being in Leo for so long. At the end of July, Mercury comes into Virgo, where he's going to spend a couple of months there. So we do have these sort of really interesting patterns with the personal planets through this mid-year period. Venus is just kind of settling into Leo, and she's going to hang out there for a while. And then Mercury is going to spend a couple of months in Virgo. So instead of Venus and Mercury kind of shifting focus and bringing new topics in every few weeks, it feels like we're doing a deeper dive on some really specific things for each of us. Tina is saying, I made it. She's on a lunch break in California. Welcome. Claudia is joining us from Miami. Great to see you. So great to see so many of you here. So I can see a couple of questions coming in. So Paul's asking about Venus in Leo. Look, in general, I think this is a really lovely combination. Leo being the sign of the sun, it's full of radiant energy. It's full of this bright, vibrant energy. And Venus there is really helping sort of bring the light forward, if you like. I'm thinking about this extended Venus in Leo cycle as like a connecting with a light, or discovering and uncovering, your inner light, or the light between two people. Venus in Leo, I think there's a lot about increasing the quality of relationships and improving the quality of our leisure and relaxation activities. We can have like high quality relaxation that is sort of nourishing and replenishing, or we can have like low quality relaxation, which is, a little bit maybe zoning out, even though we're not doing anything. And I think Venus in Leo is really into, improving the quality of experiences and connections. Now, we do get Venus in Leo retrograde every 8 years. So there will be some themes for each of us that are coming up now, July, August, September of 2023, even June 2023, that go back to the June, July, August, September period of 2015. So you might think about what was really important in your life then, see how that has led to some of these improvements in your life, and then also reflecting on what are the next level of improvements or upgrades that you want to think about. So there's a few ideas about Venus in Leo that I'm kind of exploring and working with myself and my clients. And if that's something of interest to you, I hope that's helpful. But yeah, if you want to know more about Venus in Leo, definitely let me know. Domus is here. You made it. Welcome. Rochelle is joining us from Seattle. Welcome. I see Jay is here from India. Always great to see you. Okay, so a couple more questions coming in. So Eddie's asking this Saturn station. So Saturn, of course, is stationing retrograde at 7 degrees this month, June. The station retrograde of Saturn will happen on Saturday, June 17, maybe June 18, depending on whereabouts in the world you are. And Saturn is stationing retrograde at 7 degrees Pisces. And Eddie's wondering about this station happening right on their ascendant. Eddie's ascendant is at 7 Pisces. So could I touch on Saturn transiting axis points like the midheaven or the ascendant? I think that really Saturn transits or even outer planet transits to the angles are really important. We have to remember that the angular points or degrees themselves are some of the most unique parts of our birth chart. You know, those ascendant degrees, they're changing every 4 minutes. So every 4 minutes in clock time, the degree changes on the ascendant. And so it is a really personal and individual part of the chart. And it's also really sensitive. I know it's just a calculated point. It's like an energetic place in space, but we tend to be really influenced by that. And so having Saturn on your ascendant, by transit, by station, you know, this is a real clue that there is a deepening in your understanding of your identity. There may be a clarifying in terms of what your body does and doesn't need. You know, one of the things about Saturn is that it's a planet that loves restraint. It loves limits. It loves containment. And so you might be looking for very specific outlets of your essence and your identity. You might be wanting to kind of hone or refine your personality so that it feels like a more true reflection of your core self. And the other piece about the ascendant, of course, is that it does represent the body. It's a place of vitality. And Saturn on the ascendant can bring some important realizations or clarifications about what is and isn't good for your body, whether that's the kinds of foods to eat or not eat, whether that's the kind of movement or exercise or activity that you should or shouldn't do. Even things like getting enough rest. You know, sleep is really associated with Saturn as well. And so if Saturn was on my ascendant or stationing there, I would really be prioritizing physical well-being. I'd be making sure I was doing the best things I could for my body. And if there was any health stuff coming up, I would definitely be getting, you know, whatever tests or procedures just to make sure that I could get into the best like prevention and maintenance space. That's often what Saturn really brings forward from a health perspective is this is the reality of how things are going. And this is what's going to help try to stabilize things. So here's what we need to do. You know, so you'll be getting those insights either from your own self-awareness and reflection about your body or from your healthcare providers. So there's a few pieces, you know, for Saturn specifically on the ascendant. So whether you've got a 7-degree ascendant like Eddie, or if you have your ascendant is in early Pisces, maybe 3 or 4 or 6 degrees Pisces, and Saturn is conjunct that over the next few weeks and months, that can be helpful. I think about Saturn on the ascendant as like a maturing into this updated or older version of yourself. And sometimes that involves being honest with what we've outgrown or who we're not anymore. Like, oh, I don't, you know, that's not how I interact with people anymore. Or I used to be a person that did X, Y, Z, but I don't do that anymore. I've kind of moved away from that. So it can be a chance to note or mark your own evolution. So hopefully that's helpful. Of course, if you have, you know, Saturn on your midheaven, a lot of those themes will be about career, about life direction. You know, do you want to take on more responsibility at work? Are you adjusting your priorities so that your life is anchored around different topics and different priorities? Okay, so thank you for that question. So good. So many great questions coming through about Venus. I can see that is absolutely going to be a bit of a theme for today, which makes sense. Venus is in Leo now as of June 5th. And I just want to double check. I think it's early October. Venus is in Leo until. So we're really settling into that vibe and that theme for the next few months. Yeah, it's the second week of October that Venus is in Leo until. Okay, so there's a quick question here. Somebody's made a comment about having Venus at 8 Pisces. Vera's asking or just commenting on that. And yes, I see, I can't read everyone's question at once, so we'll just get to them. So all I'll say about Venus at 8 Pisces is, or any planet at 8 Pisces, the transit of Saturn will be active in February of 2024. That's when Saturn gets to 8 degrees of Pisces. So if you have any planets at 8 degrees of Pisces or the other mutable signs, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, that transit of Saturn will be really strong in early 2024. I do have a webinar class on Saturn transits to the planets. So if you're interested in what Saturn might do by transit to a planet in your chart, I'll make sure to put the link in the show notes below, as that will be helpful for you. And then lots of questions about Venus. So Venus in... Okay, some great questions. I'll make a comment about Venus Morningstar versus Venus Evening Star, because that's a huge part of the Venus retrograde process, is that in the middle of the Venus retrograde, Venus does become invisible for a period of time. So she vanishes from the sky. And when Venus drops out of sight, she kind of fades from view in the western sky as an evening star. And then when she reemerges towards the end of August, she will be visible as morning star in the eastern sky. And there is a different quality to Venus, western or evening sky Venus versus morning star Venus. The evening star Venus, which is the one we've had for the last 9 months or so, that cycle is coming to an end in just a couple of weeks. The evening star Venus is a little bit more classically relationship oriented. So when we think about, Venus as a relationship planet, a little bit more of a Venus evening star theme. Venus evening star is a little bit more collaborative. It's a little bit more conducive to agreement or compromise or working together. And she's definitely more focused on relationship and partnership. Venus morning star is a much more independent version of Venus. So the morning star Venus that will be starting to have an impact as we head into the second half of August, and then for the following 9 months. Morning star Venus, so she's visible just before sunrise in the eastern sky. She's more independent. She's more forthright. She is less focused on maybe compromise and collaboration. She's willing to go things alone. There can be some, let's go and do this together, but there's a little bit more of an initiatory energy in the morning star version of Venus. So that's something to keep in mind, that we will be changing from one thing to the next as we go through this Venus retrograde cycle. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful there. And you can certainly explore, the ancient myth of Inanna. That's definitely tied to Venus. So that's helpful. Okay, so a couple more questions. Let's do a little bit of like a deep dive on the Venus retrograde. So when we're looking at Venus retrograde, there are some common themes which we've been talking a little bit about. And then we can personalize how Venus retrograde in a sign might influence our chart. And so first and foremost, Venus is retrograde in the sign of Leo. So you'd want to take a look at the topics of the Leo house in your chart. And that's going to be an area of life where you're reviewing and reassessing. You're kind of deepening your understanding of how that part of your chart works. And you're learning about how to add more comfort and more collaboration into this part of your life. So each of us will have a slightly different experience. You might think of it as there's like 12 different types of the Venus in Leo experience, Venus retrograde in Leo experience, based on what house is it in. If you're a Leo rising, Leo first house, having Venus retrograde there's a lot about how do you style and express the essence of you out in the world. But if Leo was 12th house for you, this might be more introspective. It might be a period of retreat and spiritual exploration. So you can think about the topics of the Leo house or part of your chart as being sort of stirred up and re-put together. It's like, I don't want to do this part of my life in these ways anymore. I want to explore something that might be more of a satisfying fit for this stage of my life. But we can also think about the fact that Venus is the ruling planet of the signs of Taurus and Libra. And so the Taurus and Libra parts of our personal charts can also go through like an update, a renewal, even a little bit of a makeover, if you will, through the Venus retrograde. Now, Venus is retrograde every 18 months, but in different signs. But each time she's retrograde, Taurus and Libra, the parts of our chart, would be going through this renewal process. But this specific, Venus retrograde in Leo plus Taurus and Libra combination, that would only happen once every 8 years. So hopefully that's giving you a few ideas about that. Aries Angel in the chat is saying, when you look at Venus retrograde, would you also take into account the effects it might have on the house that it exalts, etc.? So yeah, I would definitely take into consideration, the rulership of the houses of Taurus and Libra. You could certainly factor in Pisces as the sign where Venus is exalted. I don't typically do that in this type of instance, but you certainly could. It would be consistent with the theory here. Okay, let's see what other questions you have got going on here. Let me know, maybe you're interested in something else that's happening astrologically in the next little while. Maybe you're interested in the Jupiter sextile Saturn aspect, or we're going to have Mars opposing Saturn at the end of July. So if there's anything else, let me know. But I can see another question here about different topic. Let me just find it in the chat. I hope I'm saying your name okay. Waljit Court, I'm sorry if I'm getting the pronunciation wrong, is asking about how and when do you use derived houses in your astrology practice? And so derived houses is the practice of sort of counting around from one house to another. And there's a couple of ways that you'll be doing this even without knowing that you're doing it. For instance, if somebody is having a big thing like a transit go on in the 8th house in their natal chart, in addition to talking with the client about their own personal, maybe taxation matters or investment matters or psychological topics, I would also ask if they're in a relationship about their partner's finances. The 8th house, we say, is the second from the 7th. The 7th house we know is the partner or the relationship. And the second house around from that is the 8th, in the same way that the first house in the chart is you and the second house in the chart is your finances or your money. 7th house is partner and 8th house is partner's money. And so that's a simple way that I'm often checking in with clients. One other way this, maybe Saturn's going through your 8th house, it may be something to do with your own taxes, or it could be that your partner is going through a little bit of a restructuring or consolidation process in their own finances or with their own money and income. So that's one way that I use derived houses, is just to bring in topics or people that might be appropriate to the session or the discussion that we're having. Another really common one that I look at is when I'm talking to people about children, particularly, again, if we're talking about partners' children, your 5th house and your children, you're the 1st house and your children are your 5th house. But like, for instance, I married someone who had children from a previous relationship. So while I don't have my own kids, my partner had children. And of course, I've helped raise these wonderful humans and they are, as good as my kids in my own heart. But technically they're in my life via my partner. And so the 11th house in your individual chart or my individual chart, which is 5th from 7th, tells us about partners' children. So that can also speak to, other children, like collectively in society, adopted kids. Sometimes it'll speak to stepkids and things like that. So children where there is a little bit of like, they're in my life through a relationship with another person. So that's just another example of how I would use derived houses. So hopefully that's helpful. It's a really kind of useful piece. It's very popular in the application of horary astrology. And there are many more applications of derived houses. You can kind of count and you could go all over the chart. But they're the two main ones. Probably the other one that I've done is looking, it's again in the relational context. Like there's one client I had who had a real problem with her father-in-law. And so her father-in-law would be represented in her chart by, so 7th house would be her partner, and then her partner's father, 4 houses around from the 7th, would actually put us into the 10th house. So the astrological placements and configurations in her 10th house also speak to the dynamic with her father-in-law. And she obviously had some very intense and kind of complicated planetary configurations there. So hopefully that gives you a little idea about derived houses. It's a really fun topic to work with if you haven't looked into that already. Okay, I'm just scrolling through the comments here. So many comments about what house Venus is going to be retrograde in. Some of you have got it retrograde in the second. So that's going to be reviewing and rethinking income, spending, budgeting, saving habits. Some of you have got Venus retrograde in your 11th house. So there'll be a lot about friendships and group and organization commitments, the communities that you're a part of, and what kind of pleasure or connections are you getting out of that? Or are you no longer really enjoying those associations and maybe you're rethinking them? That is so fun to have a little look at. Okay, and I can see maybe we'll make this our final question today. Let's see. There was a question. It was on the Venus. Here we go. Hang on one second. Yeah. Okay. So Nestle is here. Great to see you. And Nestle's question is, would transiting Venus retrograde in the 8th create a delay regarding the selling of a house? Venus rules the IC in the 5th. So certainly that's one interpretation for sure. If your IC, it sounds like it's in Taurus and it's ruled by Venus, and then we're going to have this long Venus retrograde, Venus transit through your 8th house. It could indicate a delay in selling. It might indicate something like an extended settlement. When you buy a home, you make the agreement, but the money doesn't actually move for a period of time. And in different countries, there's a standard settlement, and it's a different amount of time, like in Australia versus Canada, and it's probably different again in the US. But then you can also negotiate for a shorter settlement or a much longer settlement. So I wonder about that. This necessarily wouldn't be a reason not to sell your house. I would be curious about what degree is that IC in Taurus, because there are a couple of other things that could be affecting it that might indicate it's still worth proceeding with this, even if we just need to factor in some of the delays with Venus retrograde. We do have Uranus in Taurus. So is that IC later in Taurus and getting that activation from Uranus, which is definitely, like a move indicator, wanting the freedom of maybe not being tied down. And then of course, we've also just had Jupiter come into Taurus. So anybody with the Taurus IC will be thinking about maybe upgrading or improving their home and living situation in some way. And that can happen in small ways, like, splurging on a new couch or a new bed or new utensils in the kitchen, all the way up to, upgrading your home or doing a big renovation. So there's a lot of movement, a lot of energy around the Taurus IC at the moment. So for any of you with a Taurus IC, you've got those bigger, longer cycles of Jupiter and Uranus, in addition to the Venus retrograde. And so I would certainly say, there may be some delays either in the selling or the settlement. It would be like, oh, let's negotiate a longer settlement. Or there might just be, it might take more effort and time to come to an agreement about the terms, for instance. With Venus retrograde or not, we always have that idea of negotiation as an option. And I would just really be clear on what are the essentials, like what are the things that are non-negotiables, what might be the deal breakers, and where you are willing to kind of meet someone else. But it's, having, sold a property in my life, I know it's a really big process. So I wish you all the best with it. And I hope that you're able to have that happen as smooth as possible. Neslie's saying that Uranus has already done the work. And in addition to that, her IC is at 13 Taurus. So you have Jupiter bearing down on that IC. So I would definitely be pushing forward with that. For sure. So best of luck with that. Thank you all so much for joining me today. It's always so fun to hang out and talk astrology with you for a little bit. spontaneously in an unplanned way, which is so much the part of the astrology right now. We've had a lot of chat about Venus in Leo and how to work with that and what the retrograde is all about. So hopefully that gives you a few tips and insights. For any of you who want more from me, want more astrology, or would like more details, the best place to gain all of that really timed, juicy astro info is inside my membership. And I'll just pop the link in the chat in case you want to grab that. And if you're watching this after the fact, the membership info is on my homepage, kellysastrology.com. We do member Q&As every few months, but you get a video from me each week covering every aspect that's happening astrologically. So if you're looking for tips on timing your life with astrology, that membership material is going to be absolutely golden. So I'd invite you to join us there. And for now, I'll wish you all a very happy new moon this weekend, and I'll look forward to catching you next time. So until then,